At my mother's funeral, her sister Diane approached me with cold eyes and said, "You shouldn't even be here. You're not real family." The words hit me like a sledgehammer in front of everyone gathered at St. Augustine's Memorial Chapel. My cousin, Rachel, standing nearby in her designer black dress, actually laughed. "Everyone knows Linda only kept you around for appearances," she added, loud enough for the entire front row to hear. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stood there in my secondhand black dress, holding a wilted rose I'd picked from Mom's garden that morning, feeling like an intruder at my own mother's funeral. The chapel was packed with people I'd known my whole life, yet suddenly I was a stranger. Diane Wellington, my mother's older sister, had always treated me like an unwanted guest, but today she wasn't even pretending to be civil. The funeral director, Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should begin the service," he suggested, but Diane wasn't finished. "She has no right to sit with the family," Diane declared, pointing to the front pew where immediate family traditionally sat. "Linda's real family should be up front, not some." She paused, her lips curling. Obligation she got stuck with. The whispers started immediately. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, some curious, some pitying, most just eager for drama. This was Riverside, Connecticut, after all. Old money, old families, old grudges. And I, Elena Reyes, had never quite fit into their world of country clubs and charity galas. My mother, Linda Wellington Reyes, had been the black sheep of the prestigious Wellington family. She'd married my father, Carlos Reyes, a first-generation immigrant from El Salvador who worked as a landscaper. The Wellingtons never forgave her for marrying down, and when my father died in a construction accident when I was 3, they expected her to come crawling back, properly chastened. She never did. Instead, she raised me alone, working as a librarian at the public library while her family lived in their waterfront mansions. We lived in a small apartment above Murphy's hardware store on Elm Street. She taught me to read before I could walk, shared her love of poetry and art, and never once made me feel like I was missing anything by not being part of the Wellington world. But now she was gone. A sudden heart attack at 52. And here I was, 26 years old, facing down the family that had rejected us both. "I'll sit in the back," I said quietly, not wanting to make a scene at my mother's funeral. I turned to walk away, but Mr. Harrison touched my elbow gently. "Miss Reyes," he said, "your mother left very specific instructions. You are to sit in the front row." She was quite clear about that. Diane's face flushed red. "Specific instructions? What instructions?" Linda barely had 2 pennies to rub together. What could she possibly have to instruct anyone about? "The reading of the will is scheduled for tomorrow morning at Whitmore and Associates," Mr. Harrison continued, ignoring Diane's outburst. "All beneficiaries have been notified." "Will?" Rachel scoffed. "What will? Aunt Linda lived in a rental apartment and drove a 15-year-old Honda. What's she going to leave anyone? Her library card collection?" Several people in the crowd chuckled. I felt my cheeks burn but kept my head high. These people didn't know my mother. They didn't know about the nights she stayed up late, writing in her journals. They didn't know about the mysterious meetings she sometimes had with men in expensive suits. They didn't know about the locked drawer in her desk that she told me never to open until after she was gone. I took my seat in the front row, feeling Diane's glare burning into the back of my head. The service was beautiful. Father Michael spoke about my mother's dedication to literacy, her volunteer work teaching English to immigrants, her quiet dignity. He mentioned how she'd donated thousands of books to underprivileged schools, always anonymously. Linda Wellington Reyes believed, In the power of knowledge, he said. She believed that education was the great equalizer, that books could open doors that money and status never could. I noticed Diane rolling her eyes. To her, this was all evidence of Linda's foolishness. Why give away books when you could? Sell them? Why help strangers when your own family had disowned you? After the service, as people filed past the casket, I heard more whispers. Such a shame about Linda. She could have had everything if she hadn't been so stubborn. That girl doesn't even look like a Wellington. I heard she's not even legally adopted. Just some kid Linda took in. That last comment made me freeze. Legally adopted? I'd never questioned my relationship with my mother. She was Mom. I was her daughter. We had the same stubborn chin, the same love of Victorian poetry, the same habit of humming while we cooked. But now, standing there among the Wellingtons with their sharp features and blue eyes, I felt doubt creeping in. The burial was at Riverside Cemetery, in the modest section far from the grand Wellington family mausoleum. Diane made sure to point this out to everyone within earshot. She could have been buried with our parents, she said loudly, but she chose to be here, with him. The way she said him made it clear she still hadn't forgiven my mother for marrying my father. As they lowered the casket, I stepped forward to place my rose on top. That's when Rachel grabbed my arm. You know, she whispered, I heard my mom talking to the lawyers. There's something weird about your birth certificate, something Aunt Linda never told you. I pulled away from her, my heart pounding. What are you talking about? Rachel smiled, enjoying my discomfort. Guess you'll find out tomorrow at the will reading, if you're even invited. She's invited, said a voice behind us. We turned to see James Whitmore, my mother's attorney, standing there in an impeccable charcoal suit. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ms. Reyes is not only invited, he continued, she's the primary beneficiary. The reading is at 9 a.m. sharp. I suggest everyone be there. Diane practically spat. Primary beneficiary of what? Linda's debts? Mr. Whitmore smiled politely. I'm not at liberty to discuss the contents of the will before the official reading, but I assure you, Mrs. Wellington, you'll want to be there. The rest of the burial passed in a blur. People offered condolences, some genuine, most perfunctory. The Wellingtons huddled together, whispering and shooting glances my way. I stood alone by the grave long after everyone else had left, talking to my mother like I always had. What didn't you tell me, Mom? I whispered to the freshly turned earth. What's going to happen tomorrow? That night, I went back to our apartment. The landlord had given me a month to clear out her things. I sat on her bed, surrounded by the familiar scent of her lavender hand cream, and finally opened the locked drawer in her desk. Inside, I found 3 things. A manila envelope marked, for Elena, open after the will reading, a small velvet box, and a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. I was tempted to open the envelope immediately, but my mother had taught me patience. Instead, I opened the journal. The first entry was dated 27 years ago, a year before I was born. Today I met with the private investigator again. He thinks he's found her. After all these years, I might finally know the truth about what happened to Maria Elena. Maria Elena. The name sent a shiver down my spine. That was my full name, Elena Maria Reyes. My mother always said she named me after her favorite poet, but now I wondered if there was more to it. I flipped through more pages, finding references to meetings with lawyers, investigators, and someone referred to only as the trustee. There were mentions of sealed records, court documents, and something called the Hartford Foundation. One entry from 15 years ago caught my eye. Elena asked about her father again today. She's getting older, asking more questions. I told her the same story. that Carlos died when she was 3. It's not entirely a lie. Carlos Reyes did die in an accident, but he wasn't her father. Someday I'll tell her the truth. When she's ready. When it's safe. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. Not my father? Then who was? And what did she mean by, when it's safe? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning in my childhood bed, surrounded by posters of Jane Austen quotes and postcards from museums we'd visited together. Every memory felt suddenly uncertain. Every conversation we'd had seemed to have hidden meanings. The next morning, I arrived at Whitmore & Associates 20 minutes early. The law office was in a converted Victorian mansion on Harbor Street, all dark wood and stained glass. The receptionist, a woman about my mother's age, gave me a sympathetic smile. "You must be Elena," she said. "I knew your mother. She was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," I managed. Did you know her well?" The woman hesitated. "Well enough to know she loved you more than anything in this world. Whatever happens in there today, remember that." Her words sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. Whatever happens. What was going to happen? The Wellingtons arrived exactly at 9, sweeping in like they owned the place. Diane wore a severe black suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent. Rachel was texting on her phone, looking bored. Diane's husband, Richard, a corporate lawyer, carried a briefcase and wore the expression of someone expecting to be disappointed. There were others too, distant cousins, a few family friends, and to my surprise, Mrs. Greenwood, my high school English teacher. Mr. Whitmore ushered us all into a conference room dominated by a long mahogany table. I found myself seated at one end, directly across from Diane, who looked like she'd swallowed something sour. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Whitmore began, setting out several documents. "Before we begin, I need to verify that all required parties are present." He read through a list of names, checking them off as people responded. "And Elena Maria Reyes," he finished, looking at me. "Present," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "She shouldn't even be here," Diane interrupted. "She's not a Wellington. She's not even legally—" "Mrs. Wellington," Mr. Whitmore cut her off firmly. "I assure you, Ms. Reyes has every legal right to be here. More than anyone else in this room, in fact." That shut her up, though her glare could have melted steel. Mr. Whitmore opened a folder and pulled out a document. "This is the last will and testament of Linda Marie Wellington Reyes, executed 3 months ago in the presence of 3 witnesses, including myself. It supersedes all previous wills and codicils." He began reading the standard legal language, but I could feel the tension building in the room. Diane's foot was tapping impatiently under the table. Rachel had actually put down her phone. "To my sister, Diane Wellington Harrison," Mr. Whitmore read. "I leave the sum of $1, along with my sincere hope that she someday learns the difference between price and value." Diane's face went from red to purple. $1. This is insulting. "I'll contest this. This is clearly—" "Please allow me to continue," Mr. Whitmore said calmly. "To my niece, Rachel Wellington, I leave my collection of first edition poetry books, with the hope that she might actually read them, instead of using them as Instagram props." Rachel's mouth fell open. I bit my lip to keep from smiling. Mom always did have a wicked sense of humor. Mr. Whitmore continued through several smaller bequests: her car to a coworker who needed reliable transportation, her personal library, to the literacy program she'd volunteered with, various mementos to friends and colleagues. "To Margaret Greenwood," he read, "I leave my mother's pearl necklace, with gratitude for believing in my daughter when others wouldn't." Mrs. Greenwood dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She'd always encouraged my writing, even when others said, "A Wellington Scholarship winner should pursue something more practical than English literature." "And now," Mr. Whitmore said, his voice taking on a different tone, We come to the primary beneficiary. He looked directly at me. To my daughter, Elena Maria Reyes, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including all assets held in trust, all rights and royalties from the Hartford Foundation, and full control of Wellington Industries. The room exploded. Wellington Industries? Diane shrieked. That's impossible. Linda had no connection to Wellington Industries. Our father disowned her. This is fraud, Richard declared, already pulling out his phone. We'll have this thrown out in court before. If I may continue, Mr. Whitmore raised his voice over the chaos. He pulled out another document. This certificate proves that Linda Wellington Reyes was the sole heir to Thomas Wellington's 40% stake in Wellington Industries. Thomas Wellington never disowned his daughter. That was a fiction created by certain family members after his death. That's a lie. Diane was on her feet now. I have the original will, properly notarized and filed with the state, Mr. Whitmore continued calmly. Thomas Wellington left very specific instructions. His shares were to be held in trust, managed by a discreet trustee until Linda chose to claim them. She never did. Instead, she transferred them all to her daughter upon her death. Her daughter? Rachel sneered. Elena isn't even... Furthermore, Mr. Whitmore interrupted, pulling out yet another document. There is the matter of the Hartford Foundation. I felt like I was drowning in revelations. Wellington Industries? The Hartford Foundation? These were names I'd heard whispered at family gatherings I wasn't invited to. Entities that existed in a world my mother had supposedly left behind. The Hartford Foundation was established by Margaret Hartford Wellington, Linda's grandmother, in 1952, Mr. Whitmore explained. It was created to support education and literacy programs with a current endowment of approximately $80 million. Someone in the room gasped. I think it might have been me. Linda Wellington Reyes has served as the anonymous director of the Hartford Foundation for the past 20 years, Mr. Whitmore continued. She personally oversaw the distribution of over $30 million in grants and scholarships during that time. I thought of all the nights my mother had worked late, all the mysterious phone calls, all the times she'd told me she was at library board meetings. She'd been running a multi-million-dollar foundation while we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment and clipped coupons. This is impossible, Diane insisted, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Linda was a librarian. She drove an old Honda. She lived like a pauper. By choice, Mr. Whitmore said simply. Your sister chose to live modestly. She chose to work in a position where she could directly help people. She chose to raise her daughter with values rather than valuables. Her daughter, Richard said, emphasizing the words. That's the real question here, isn't it? Elena's parentage has always been unclear. Mr. Whitmore's expression hardened. I'm going to stop you right there, Mr. Harrison. The matter of Ms. Reyes's parentage is not unclear at all. In fact, it's the key to understanding everything. He pulled out one final document. This is a sealed court record from 27 years ago. It was recently unsealed at Linda Wellington Reyes's request to be revealed upon her death. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This was it, the truth my mother had kept from me, the secret that had shaped our entire lives. 27 years ago, Mr. Whitmore began, a young woman named Maria Elena Santos gave birth to a daughter at Hartford Memorial Hospital. Maria Elena was 19 years old, unmarried, and working as a housekeeper for the Wellington family. The room had gone completely silent. Even Diane was listening now, her face pale. The father, Mr. Whitmore continued, looking directly at Diane, was Charles Wellington, your brother, Mrs. Harrison. Diane made a strangled sound. That's a vicious lie. Charles Wellington not only had a relationship with Maria Elena Santos, Mr. Whitmore interrupted. He was planning to marry her. The documents are all here, the engagement ring receipt. the wedding venue booking, the letter to his father stating his intentions. But Charles died in that sailing accident, Richard said slowly, like he was piecing something together. 3 weeks before the wedding date, Mr. Whitmore confirmed, and 2 months before Maria Elena gave birth. After Charles's death, certain members of the Wellington family tried to pay Maria Elena to disappear. She refused. 2 weeks after giving birth, she was killed in what was reported as a mugging. Gone wrong. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. I felt like I was falling, even though I was sitting perfectly still. The baby, Mr. Whitmore continued, his voice gentler now, was placed in the care of social services. Linda Wellington, who had been away at graduate school during most of this, returned home for her brother's funeral and learned what had happened. She spent the next year fighting to adopt her brother's child, her niece. She succeeded, but at the cost of her relationship with most of her family. He looked at me then, his eyes kind behind his glasses. Elena, your mother, Linda, was actually your aunt. Your biological parents were Charles Wellington and Maria Elena Santos. Linda raised you as her own daughter to protect you and to honor both your parents' memory. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. All those years, all those moments that suddenly made sense. The way she'd sometimes look at me with such fierce protectiveness. The way she'd insisted I learn Spanish, honoring my heritage. The locked drawer, the secret meetings, the journal entries. She knew, I whispered. She knew everything. She knew, Mr. Whitmore confirmed, and she spent her life making sure you would inherit what was rightfully yours, not just the money or the company shares, but your identity, your truth. Diane had collapsed back into her chair, her face ashen. Charles and the maid? But we paid her. I mean, the family settled. You tried to buy her silence, Mr. Whitmore said coldly, and when she wouldn't be bought, she conveniently died. Linda suspected the mugging wasn't random, though. She could never prove it. That's why she kept Elena's identity secret for so long. She was protecting her. I thought about my mother, my aunt, Linda. How she'd given up everything to raise me. How she'd lived modestly when she could have claimed millions. How she'd chosen love over money, principle over privilege. The first 12 years of my life were a mystery I didn't know needed solving. I grew up believing I was Elena Reyes, daughter of Linda and Carlos Reyes, just another kid in Riverside's working-class neighborhood. We lived above Murphy's hardware store, where the floorboards creaked and the radiator clanged all winter. But Mom made it feel like a palace. She hung crystals in every window to catch the light and turned our tiny balcony into a jungle of potted plants and herbs. Beauty doesn't cost money, Elena, she'd say, arranging wildflowers in a chipped vase. It costs attention. Looking back, there were signs everywhere that our life wasn't what it seemed. Mom spoke perfect Spanish but claimed she learned it. In college, she could identify every painting in the Met's catalog, but said she just liked art books. She knew which fork to use at fancy restaurants, but insisted she'd picked it up from movies. I remember the day everything started to shift. I was 13, working on a family tree project for school. Most kids had sprawling diagrams with grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Mine was painfully sparse. Just Mom, me, and a father who died when I was 3. What about Dad's family? I asked her one evening. We were sitting at our small kitchen table, the one she'd painted turquoise and stenciled with quotes from Mary Oliver poems. She paused, her teacup halfway to her lips. Your father was an only child. His parents passed away before you were born. And your family? You must have someone. Parents, brothers, sisters. The cup clattered slightly as she set it down. Sometimes families are complicated, Elena. The people who raise you, who love. You, who show up for your school plays and hold your hand at the doctor. Those are your real family. I should have pushed harder, but I saw the pain flicker across her face and let it go. Mom never talked about her past, and I'd learned not to ask. But things kept happening that made me wonder. Like the time we ran into Mrs. Vanderberg at the grocery store. She was one of Riverside's grand dames, the kind who wore pearls to the supermarket. She took one look at Mom and gasped. "Linda Wellington. My goodness, I haven't seen you since—" "It's Linda Reyes now," Mom interrupted quickly. "And I'm afraid you have me confused with someone else." Mrs. Vanderberg stared at her, then at me, then back at Mom. "Of course. My mistake. You look exactly like someone I used to know. Or the anonymous scholarships that always seemed to appear right when we needed them. When I got accepted to Riverside Prep on a merit scholarship, Mom cried. But I later found out the school had never offered merit scholarships before that year. Then there were the books. Mom worked at the public library, but our apartment was filled with first editions and rare volumes that seemed too valuable for a librarian's salary. When I asked about them, she'd say they were gifts from book sales or lucky finds. I was BA 16 when I first saw the Wellington name connected to Mom. I was researching local history for a school project and found an old newspaper photo from a charity gala 25 years ago. There was Mom, younger, wearing a designer gown, identified as Linda Wellington, daughter of industrialist Thomas Wellington. I printed the photo and confronted her that night. "Who are you?" I demanded, slapping the paper on the kitchen counter. "Who am I?" Mom's face went pale. She sank into a chair and rubbed her temples, a gesture I recognized as her thinking pose. "You're my daughter," she said finally. "That's all that matters." "That's not an answer." "Elena, please. I promise when the time is right I'll tell you everything. But not now. It's not safe." "Not safe? What does that mean? Are we in witness protection or something?" She almost smiled at that. "Something like that. Can you trust me? Just for a little longer?" I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the fear in her eyes stopped me. Whatever secrets she was keeping, they terrified her. So I nodded and went to my room, adding this mystery to all the others. Life went on. I excelled at school, got into Yale on another anonymous scholarship, and majored in literature because Mom had raised me to believe books could save your life. She was so proud at my graduation, taking pictures with her ancient camera while my classmates' parents recorded everything on their phones. After college, I came back to Riverside and got a job at the local newspaper. Mom and I fell into a comfortable routine: Sunday dinners, library volunteer shifts, occasional trips to New York for museum days. We never had much money, but we had each other. Then, 3 months ago, Mom started acting strange. She was nervous, jumpy, constantly checking her phone. She began meeting with lawyers and accountants, always careful to schedule appointments when I was at work. "Just getting my affairs in order," she said when I asked. "Everyone should have a will, Elena, even people like us who don't have much." One evening, I came home early and found her burning papers in the sink. "Mom, what are you doing?" She spun around, startled. "Just clearing out old documents. Nothing important." But I saw fear in her eyes again. Real fear. "Mom, if you're in trouble—" "I'm not in trouble," she said quickly. "I'm just preparing." "For what?" She cupped my face in her hands, her eyes searching mine. "Elena, my beautiful, brave girl, everything I've ever done has been to protect you. Remember that. No matter what happens, no matter what you learn, know that I love you more than my own life." 2 weeks later, she had the heart attack. The doctor said it was sudden, that she probably didn't suffer. But I wondered if the stress of whatever she'd been dealing with had contributed. If I had pushed harder for answers, could I have helped? Could I have saved her? At her funeral, when Diane Wellington accused me of not being family, all those old questions came flooding back. Who was I really? Why had Mom been so afraid? What had she been preparing for? Now, sitting in this lawyer's office, learning that my whole life had been built on secrets and lies, I felt like I was drowning. Linda wasn't my mother. She was my aunt. My real parents were dead. My father in an accident. My mother in what might have been murder. I need air, I gasped, pushing back from the conference table. Elena, wait! Mr. Whitmore started, but I was already out the door. I ran down the hallway and burst out onto Harbor Street, gulping in the cool morning air. My whole body was shaking. Everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. But, also, everything made sense now. The fear, the secrets, the careful way Mom, Linda, had constructed our life. Elena? I turned to find Mrs. Greenwood standing in the doorway. My high school English teacher looked exactly the same as she had 10 years ago, gray hair in a neat bun, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I know this is a lot to take in, she said gently. You knew? The words came out sharper than I intended. You knew all along? She nodded. Your mother, Linda, confided in me when you were in my AP English class. She was worried about you going to college, being on your own. She wanted someone else to know the truth in case something happened to her. Why didn't you tell me? It wasn't my secret to tell, but I watched over you, just as she asked. And I saw what she saw. A brilliant, compassionate young woman who deserved to know where she came from, but only when it was safe. Safe from what? From who? Mrs. Greenwood glanced around, then stepped closer. Your Aunt Diane wasn't the only one who wanted your mother to disappear. There were others in the Wellington circle who saw Maria Elena as a threat to their social order. Some of those people are still around, still powerful. Are you saying my mother was actually murdered? I'm saying Linda had good reasons for keeping you hidden in plain sight. She gave up everything. Her family, her inheritance, her social position, to raise you as a normal child, away from the poisonous influence of that world. I thought about our small apartment, the secondhand clothes, the careful budgeting. But she didn't have to live like that. She had millions. She had millions she never touched, because accessing that money would have put you on the Wellington radar. She knew what that family did to people who didn't fit their image. She'd seen it firsthand. I leaned against the building, trying to process it all. So what now? I suddenly own part of Wellington Industries? I'm in charge of an $80 million foundation? I don't know anything about running companies or charities. You know more than you think, Mrs. Greenwood said. Linda raised you for this, even if you didn't realize it. All those volunteer hours at the literacy center? The summers you spent teaching English to immigrant families? The way you've always stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves? That's exactly what the Hartford Foundation needs. But Diane and the others, they'll fight this. Let them. Linda was meticulous. Every document is airtight. She spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Mrs. Greenwood smiled. Besides, you're not alone. There are people who have been waiting for the truth to come out. People who knew and loved your parents, both sets of them. We went back inside where the reading was continuing. Diane was consulting furiously with Richard while Rachel sulked in her chair. Mr. Whitmore was explaining the structure of the Hartford Foundation. The foundation's board consists of 5 members, he was saying. 3 positions are appointed by the director. That's now you, Elena. The other 2 are hereditary Wellington seats, currently held by Diane and her son, James. James isn't here, Diane snapped. He's in Singapore on business. Actually, Mr. Whitmore said, checking his phone. James just landed at JFK. He's on his way here now. He wants to meet his cousin. Diane's face went even paler. James knows about this? James has known for several years. He's been one of Linda's confidential advisors on the foundation board, working under a pseudonym. The betrayal on Diane's face was almost comical. Her own son had been working with Linda behind her back. Mr. Whitmore continued revealing the extent of Linda's secret empire. Beyond the foundation and the company's shares, there were real estate holdings, art collections, and investment portfolios, all carefully managed to grow quietly while we lived our modest life above the hardware store. Why? I finally asked. Why live like we did when she had all this? Mr. Whitmore smiled sadly. She wrote you a letter explaining everything. She asked me to give it to you after the will reading. He handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name in Mom's neat handwriting. I tucked it into my purse. I'd read it later, alone, when I could cry without an audience. The door opened and a tall man in his early 30s entered. He had the Wellington features, sharp cheekbones, blue eyes, but his expression was warm, unlike his mother's. "Sorry I'm late," he said, then looked directly at me. "You must be Elena. I'm James, your cousin." He crossed the room and, to everyone's surprise, hugged me. "I'm so sorry about Aunt Linda. She was an extraordinary woman." "James," Diane hissed, "what are you doing?" He turned to his mother. "What I should have done years ago, standing up for what's right." He looked back at me. "I've been working with Aunt Linda since I discovered the truth about Uncle Charles and Maria Elena. I was going through old family papers for a college thesis and found letters between them. Love letters. They were beautiful." "You knew?" Diane's voice was barely a whisper. "I knew. And when I confronted Aunt Linda, she told me everything. About Elena. About what the family did to Maria Elena. About the cover-up after her death." His voice hardened. "About how you all tried to bury the truth along with Uncle Charles." "We were protecting the family name," Richard protested. "From what? From the fact that Charles fell in love with someone you considered beneath him? That he was going to marry her?" James shook his head. "The only thing you protected was your own prejudice." He turned back to me. "I've been helping Aunt Linda manage the Foundation's international projects. I'd like to continue if you'll have me." I looked at this cousin I'd never known existed, who'd chosen truth over family loyalty, and nodded. "I'd like that." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of legal documents and financial statements. Diane and Richard left in a fury, threatening lawsuits. Rachel lingered, studying me with new interest, probably calculating whether being nice to me might salvage her trust fund. Finally, only James, Mr. Whitmore, and I remained. "There's one more thing," Mr. Whitmore said. He handed me a small key. "Linda asked me to give you this. It opens a safety deposit box at Riverside Savings Bank. She said you'd know when to open it." I clutched the key, another mystery in a day full of revelations. James drove me home in his rental car. We talked about the foundation, about Linda's secret work, about our father Charles. "I wish I'd known him," I said. "Me too. But from his letters, he was a lot like Aunt Linda. Idealistic, determined to do the right thing, even when it cost him." James glanced at me. "I think he would have loved you." "How do you know?" "Because in one of his last letters to Maria Elena, he wrote about the baby. He said he couldn't wait to meet his daughter, to teach her to sail, to show her the world. He had so many plans." Tears pricked my eyes. Another life stolen, another future erased. When we reached my apartment, James hesitated. "Elena, there's something else you should know. About your mother's, Maria Elena's death." My heart clenched. "What about it?" "I've been investigating. Quietly, carefully. I think Aunt Linda was too, near the end. That's why she was meeting with private investigators." "You think she was murdered?" "I think there are people who know more than they've ever admitted. And now that you're public, now that you have power..." He trailed off. "You think I'm in danger?" I think you should be careful. The Wellington name opens doors, but it also makes enemies. He handed me a business card. This is my private cell. Call me anytime, day or night. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, exhausted beyond measure. The familiar rooms felt foreign now, like a stage set for a play that had ended. I sat on Mom's bed and opened her letter. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you finally know the truth. I'm sorry I kept it from you for so long. Every day I wanted to tell you about your amazing parents, about the love story that brought you into this world, about the courage your mother showed in standing up to my family. But I was afraid. The same people who may have killed your mother were still out there, still powerful. I thought if I kept you hidden, if I raised you away from that world, you'd be safe. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was a coward. But I loved you too much to risk losing you. Your father, Charles, was the best of us. He saw people for who they were, not where they came from. When he met Maria Elena, he fell completely in love. She was brilliant, fierce, proud. She challenged him, made him laugh, made him want to be better, just like you do for everyone around you. When they died, I thought my heart would break. But then there was you. This tiny, perfect baby who needed someone to fight for her. And I found my purpose. Everything I've done has been for you. The foundation, the company shares, all of it. I've been building your inheritance, your platform to continue your parents' legacy. They wanted to change the world, to break down the barriers that keep people apart. Now it's your turn. Be brave, my darling girl. Be strong. Be kind. The Wellington money comes with strings, but you're the one holding the scissors now. Cut away the rot, keep what's good, and build something new. And know that I have loved you every single day of your life, not as an aunt, but as a mother. Because that's what you made me the moment I held you. All my love. Forever, Mom. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed. For the mother who raised me. For the parents I never knew. For all the secrets and sacrifices that had shaped my life. When the tears finally stopped, I walked to the window and looked out at Riverside spread below. The familiar streets seemed different now, full of hidden histories and untold stories. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank and open that safety deposit box. Tomorrow, I would start learning about my inheritance, my responsibilities, my new life. But tonight, I would remember the woman who gave up everything to keep me safe. Linda Wellington Reyes, who chose love over money, principle over privilege, and made sure that when the truth finally came out, I'd be strong enough to handle it. I thought about what James had said, about people who knew more than they admitted, about the possibility that my mother's death wasn't random, about the danger that might come with the Wellington name. But I also thought about the foundation, about the millions of dollars that could change lives, about the company that could be used for good instead of greed. Linda had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. She'd built me an arsenal disguised as an inheritance. I wasn't the scared little girl who'd stood in the back at her mother's funeral anymore. I was Elena Maria Reyes Wellington, daughter of Charles and Maria Elena, raised by Linda. I had their love, their courage, and now their power. And I was going to use it all. The morning after the will reading, I stood outside Riverside Savings Bank, clutching the small key Mr. Whitmore had given me. My hand trembled slightly as I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The bank was one of those old institutions with marble floors and brass fixtures, the kind that whispered of old money and older secrets. "May I help you?" The teller was young, probably fresh out of college with a practiced smile. "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said, showing her the key. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the box number engraved on it. "Oh, that's one of our legacy boxes. You'll need to speak with Mr. Peterson. He handles all the Wellington family accounts." Of course, there was a special banker for the Wellingtons. Of course, Linda had maintained some connection to that world, even while we lived above the hardware store. Mr. Peterson turned out to be a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and knowing eyes. He led me to a private room, then disappeared into the vault. When he returned, he was carrying a large metal box. "Your mother, Ms. Wellington Reyes, updated the contents of this box just 3 months ago," he said softly. "She asked me to tell you that everything inside was meant for this moment." He left me alone with the box. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside, I found layers of history. On top was a video camera with a note. "Watch this first." Beneath it were documents, photographs, letters, and at the very bottom, wrapped in blue velvet, something that made my heart stop: my mother Maria Elena's journal. I set up the video camera on the table and pressed play. Linda's face appeared on the small screen, looking tired but determined. This had been recorded recently, probably around the time she started acting strange. "Elena, my darling girl," she began. "If you're watching this, then you know the truth. And if you know the truth, then it's time for you to know everything." She paused, gathering herself. 27 years ago, I made a choice that changed both our lives. When I discovered what happened to your mother, Maria Elena, I couldn't prove it was murder. The police ruled it a random mugging, case closed. But I knew better. Your mother was killed 2 blocks from the Wellington estate, on her way to meet with a lawyer about Charles's will. She had documents with her, proof of your paternity, Charles's letters, legal papers that would have guaranteed your inheritance. Linda's eyes hardened. Those documents were never found. The mugger took nothing else, not her purse, not her jewelry, just the papers. I spent years trying to investigate, but every path led to dead ends. Private investigators quit suddenly. Witnesses recanted statements. Evidence disappeared. She leaned closer to the camera. But I never stopped collecting information. Everything I found is in this box. Bank records showing large payments from Wellington accounts to certain individuals right after Maria Elena's death. Phone records placing Diane at locations she claimed she never visited. Testimony from a former Wellington security guard who saw something that night but was paid to leave town. My heart was racing. This wasn't just family drama. This was evidence of a conspiracy. "I couldn't go to the police," Linda continued. "The Wellingtons had too many connections. So I did the only thing I could. I protected you and gathered evidence. For 27 years I've been building a case. Now it's yours to finish." She held up a business card to the camera. "This is Thomas Martinez. He's a federal prosecutor, and more importantly, he was Maria Elena's cousin. He's been waiting for enough evidence to reopen the case. With what's in this box and your newfound legal standing, you finally have enough." The video ended, leaving me staring at a black screen. I sat back, overwhelmed. Linda hadn't just been protecting me. She'd been building a case for justice. I turned to the contents of the box. The first folder contained financial records. Large cash withdrawals from Diane's personal account in the days following Maria Elena's death. Payments to a private security firm known for fixing problems for wealthy clients. A paper trail that led to offshore accounts. The next folder held witness statements. The security guard Linda mentioned had given a detailed account before disappearing. He'd seen a black sedan near the scene, recognized it as a Wellington company car. He'd seen someone matching Diane's description nearby. But it was Maria Elena's journal that shattered me completely. Her handwriting was elegant, her English flavored with Spanish phrases. The pages told a love story. How she met Charles when he came to inspect the house staff. How they fell in love despite everything. How they made plans for a future together. One entry stood out. Charles's family knows about the baby now. Diane came to see me today. She offered me money to leave, to spare the family embarrassment. I refused. She said I'd regret it, that people like me don't get happy endings with people like them. But Charles loves me. He's filing papers to ensure our child inherits everything. We're getting married next month, whether his family approves or not. Nothing can stop us now. The final entry was dated the day before she died. Meeting with the lawyer tomorrow to sign papers. Charles left me everything in his will. Diane is furious. She says I'm stealing her brother's legacy. But our daughter is his legacy. I won't let them take that from her. Charles believed in justice, in doing what's right. For him, for our baby, I'll fight. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. My mother had been brave, defiant, full of hope. She'd died fighting for my future. At the bottom of the box, I found more recent documents. Linda's investigation notes, surveillance photos of Diane meeting with various people over the years, records of threats made against her, and most damning, a recording. I plugged the small digital recorder into my phone and listened. It was Diane's voice, speaking to someone about the Maria Elena problem just days after Charles's death. She has to go. She has the will, the letters, everything. If she talks to the lawyers, if she files those papers. No, it has to look random. A mugging, maybe. This city's dangerous for a young woman alone at night. I had to stop the recording. My stomach churned. This was evidence of premeditated murder. I gathered everything carefully, my hands shaking. Linda had spent 27 years building this case. She'd lived in fear, kept secrets, sacrificed everything to protect me while seeking justice for my mother. And now, she'd passed the torch to me. I left the bank with the box and went straight to the address on Thomas Martinez's card. His office was in the Federal Building downtown, all glass and steel and security checkpoints. When I told the receptionist my name, she immediately stood up. "Ms. Reyes, Mr. Martinez has been expecting you. He said to send you right in whenever you arrived." Thomas Martinez was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with kind brown eyes that reminded me painfully of the photos I'd seen of my mother. He stood when I entered, and I could see the family resemblance immediately. "Elena," he said softly, "you look just like her." "You knew my mother?" Maria Elena was my favorite cousin. We grew up together in El Salvador before my family immigrated. When she came to America, she lived with us while she looked for work. His eyes darkened. I was in law school when she died. Too young, too powerless to help. But I've been waiting for this day ever since. I set the box on his desk. "Linda said you've been waiting for evidence." He opened the box, his expression growing graver as he examined each document. When he reached the recording, he played it twice, taking notes. "This is enough," he said finally. "More than enough. With your legal standing as Charles Wellington's heir and Maria Elena's daughter, we can reopen the case. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to murder." "What happens now?" "Now we build a federal case. The Wellington name carries weight, but so does justice. Your Aunt Linda was brilliant. She documented everything meticulously. This isn't just about your mother's death anymore. There's evidence here of fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice." He looked at me intently. "Are you prepared for what's coming? The Wellingtons will fight back. They'll try to discredit you, threaten you, possibly worse." I thought about my mother's journal, her determination to fight for my future. I thought about Linda, spending decades gathering evidence while raising me in hiding. I thought about Charles, who chose love over family approval. "I'm ready," I said. Thomas nodded. "I'll convene a grand jury. But Elena, you need protection. The Wellingtons still have power, still have connections." "I have connections too," I realized. "James Wellington is on my side, and I control Wellington Industries now. I'm not the powerless girl they think I am." As if summoned by my words, my phone buzzed. It was James. "Elena, where are you? Diane's called an emergency board meeting. She's trying to invalidate the will based on mental incompetence. I'm with Thomas Martinez, the federal prosecutor. There was a pause. Good. That's exactly where you should be. I'll handle the board meeting. You focus on justice. I hung up and looked at Thomas. We need to move fast. We will. But first, there's something else you should see. He pulled out a file from his desk. I've been investigating the Wellingtons for years, waiting for an opening. Your mother's case is just the beginning. There's a pattern of corruption, intimidation, and worse, going back decades. The file contained case after case of Wellington, companies crushing competition through illegal means, of environmental violations covered up, of whistleblowers silenced. The empire was built on more than just inherited wealth. It was built on corruption. Charles was different, Thomas said, seeing my expression. He wanted to reform the company, make it ethical. That's another reason some family members were glad when he died. With Maria Elena's influence, he might have actually changed things. I felt a surge of pride for the father I'd never known. He hadn't just loved my mother, he'd shared her values. I want to finish what they started, I said. All of it. Justice for my mother, reform for the company, everything. Thomas smiled. Then we'd better get to work. I spent the rest of the day in Thomas's office, giving a formal statement, reviewing evidence and planning strategy. By evening, news had leaked that the Maria Elena Santos murder case was being reopened. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Diane, you're destroying our family. Rachel, is this really necessary? Can't we talk about this? Unknown number. Back off or regret it. But there were supportive messages too. Mrs. Greenwood, so proud of you. Former employees of Linda's literacy program, we always knew she was special. And James, board meeting was brutal, but I held them off. Stay strong. That night, I stayed at a hotel Thomas recommended, one with good security. I couldn't go back to the apartment. It felt too exposed now. As I sat on the bed, surrounded by legal documents and family secrets, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Ms. Reyes? The voice was elderly, female, uncertain. My name is Grace Morrison. I was your grandmother's, Maria Elena's mother's best friend. My heart nearly stopped. My grandmother? Rosa Santos. She died 5 years ago, never knowing what happened to her daughter. But I knew Maria Elena. I helped her when she first came to this country, and I have something that belongs to you. We arranged to meet the next morning at a small cafe downtown. Grace was a tiny woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She clutched a worn leather bag like it contained precious treasure. Maria Elena gave this to me the week before she died, Grace said, pulling out a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. She said if anything happened to her, I should keep these safe for her baby. I untied the ribbon with trembling fingers. The letters were all from Charles to Maria Elena, spanning months. They were beautiful, passionate, full of plans and dreams. My dearest Maria Elena, one began. Every day I wake up grateful that you exist in this world. My family thinks love is about alliances and advantages. You've taught me it's about truth and courage. Another detailed his plans to restructure Wellington Industries. With you by my side, we'll transform this company. No more exploitation. No more crushing the little guy. We'll prove that success and integrity can coexist. The final letter was dated the day before he died. Tomorrow I'm telling the board about our engagement. There will be hell to pay, but I don't care. You and our child are my future. The Wellington name will stand for something good again. Together, we'll change everything. Forever yours, Charles. He really loved her, I whispered. Grace nodded. They loved each other, and they loved you before you were even born. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Rosa would be so proud. You're fighting for both of them now. I added the letters to my evidence collection. Each new piece felt like another brick in the foundation of truth Linda had laid. That afternoon, Thomas called with news. The grand jury convened. Based on the evidence, they're issuing indictments. Diane Wellington Harrison for conspiracy to commit murder, Richard Harrison for obstruction of justice, several former Wellington security personnel for various charges. When will they be arrested? Federal marshals are on their way to the Wellington estate now. Are you somewhere safe? Yes. What about the company? With the board in chaos and criminal charges pending, your position as majority shareholder is secure. James Wellington has called an emergency stakeholder meeting for tomorrow. He says you should be there. I hung up and turned on the news. Breaking story. Federal investigation into Wellington family. Arrests imminent. Murder case from 27 years ago reopened. My phone rang again. James. Elena, it's happening. Diane and Richard are being arrested as we speak. The board is in panic mode. We need stable leadership now more than ever. Can you come to headquarters? I thought about it. Hiding had kept me safe for 27 years, but the time for hiding was over. I'll be there in an hour. I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to job interviews, to Mom's funeral, to the will reading. But this time, I didn't feel like an imposter. I was Elena Maria Reyes Wellington Santos, and I was done apologizing for existing. Wellington Industries. Headquarters was a gleaming tower in the financial district. I'd walked past it countless times, never imagining I had any connection to it. Now I owned the largest share. James met me in the lobby. Ready for this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. The boardroom was on the top floor, all glass walls and spectacular views. The remaining board members looked shell-shocked. Some I recognized. From the funeral, Diane's allies who'd sneered at me. They weren't sneering now. Ladies and gentlemen, James announced, Elena Reyes Wellington, our majority shareholder. I stood at the head of the table where my grandfather had once sat, where Charles would have sat if he'd lived. I know this is unexpected, I began. 3 days ago, I thought I was just a librarian's daughter. Now I know the truth. Charles Wellington was my father. Maria Elena Santos was my mother. They loved each other, and they had dreams for this company, dreams of integrity, responsibility, and positive change. I looked around the room. The criminal investigations will reveal how far we've strayed from those ideals. But this is also an opportunity. We can rebuild. We can become the company Charles envisioned, one that profits without exploitation, succeeds without corruption. And if we refuse, asked one older board member, then I'll use my majority share to replace you with people who share my vision. The Wellington name is going to stand for something good again, whether you're part of that transformation or not. There was silence, then slowly, nods of agreement. They knew the old ways were finished. After the meeting, James and I stood at the window, looking out over the city. You handled that perfectly, he said. Charles would be proud. I hope so. I never knew him, but I feel like I'm carrying his torch. You're carrying all their torches. Charles's vision, Maria Elena's courage, Linda's determination, and adding your own light to it. My phone buzzed. Thomas Martinez. Elena, Diane's been arrested. She's claiming innocence, demanding bail. But with the recording and the evidence, the judge denied it. She'll stand trial. Justice. After 27 years, justice. That night I visited Linda's grave. I brought the letters from Charles, the journal from Maria Elena, and a single white rose. We did it, Mom, I whispered. The truth is out. They can't hurt us anymore. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice. This is just the beginning, my brave girl. Now make it count. I would. For Charles and Maria Elena, whose love story deserved a better ending. For Linda, who sacrificed everything to protect me. For myself, and for everyone, who'd been crushed by the Wellington machine. Tomorrow, I would start restructuring the company. I would work with Thomas to ensure justice was served. I would use the Hartford Foundation to fund the causes my parents believed in. But tonight, I stood at my mother's grave, my aunt's grave, my savior's grave, and promised her that every sacrifice had been worth it. The Charity case, the girl who wasn't supposed to be family, was now the one holding all the cards. And I was going to play them right. As I walked back through the cemetery, my phone rang. Mrs. Greenwood. Elena, I just saw the news. Are you all right? I'm better than all right. I'm ready. Good. Because I have 30 former Wellington employees who want to testify about company corruption. And the Literary Foundation has proposals for expanding into immigrant education programs. When you're ready. Monday morning, I said. My office. Let's change the world. I hung up and looked back at the 3 graves, Charles Wellington, Maria Elena Santos, and Linda Wellington Reyes. 3 lives cut short, 3 voices silenced. But their dreams lived on in me. The Wellington Empire had been built on secrets and lies. I was going to rebuild it on truth and justice. And maybe, finally, give their love story the ending it deserved. Not in death and separation, but in the legacy of change they'd imagined together. The Charity case had inherited everything, and now everyone would see what I'd do with it. 6. Months after that first board meeting, I stood in my office at Wellington Industries, looking out over the city that had once felt so far beyond my reach. The office had been Diane's, all sharp edges and cold marble, but I'd transformed it. Now plants lined the windows, inherited books from our apartment filled the shelves, and photos of Charles, Maria Elena, and Linda sat proudly on my desk. The Times is online too, my assistant Sarah called out. They want to comment on the trial verdict. The trial. 3 months of testimony, evidence, and revelations that shook Riverside's old money establishment to its core. Diane had finally been convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. Richard got 5 years for obstruction of justice. Several former security personnel faced various charges. But more importantly, Maria Elena's story had been told. The young woman who dared to love above her station, who fought for her child's future until her last breath, finally had justice. Ms. Reyes? The Times reporter sounded young, eager. How do you feel about today's verdict? I feel that truth has a way of surfacing, even after 27 years, I replied. My mother, Maria Elena Santos, was murdered not because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but because she dared to claim her place at the right table. Today's verdict doesn't bring her back, but it ensures her story will be remembered correctly. And what about Wellington Industries' transformation? The company stock has risen 30% since you took over, defying critics who said ethical business practices would hurt profits. I smiled. Turns out treating workers fairly, investing in communities, and operating transparently is actually good for business. My father Charles knew that. It just took us a while to catch up to his vision. After the interview, I walked through the executive floor. 6 months ago, these halls had been sterile, intimidating. Now they buzzed with energy. Young executives mixed with veteran employees. The old guard who'd chosen to stay had embraced the changes while those who couldn't adapt had left. James met me at the elevator. My cousin had become my closest advisor, helping navigate the corporate complexities I was still learning. Ready for the foundation board meeting? He asked. Always. The Hartford Foundation had become my passion project. We'd expanded from Linda's literacy programs to include immigrant services, educational access initiatives, and small business grants for marginalized communities. In 6 months, we'd distributed more funds than Diane had in 5 years as a board. member. The foundation's boardroom was different too. Gone were the stuffy portraits of old Wellington men. In their place hung photos from our programs, children reading their first books, immigrant families at citizenship ceremonies, small business owners cutting ribbons at grand openings. Today's agenda includes the Santos Wellington Scholarship. Proposal, James announced as board members took their seats. The scholarship, named for both my parents, would provide full college funding for first-generation Americans. As we discussed the program details, my phone buzzed. Rachel, my cousin, had undergone her own transformation in recent months. Elena, I'm at the warehouse. You need to see what I found in Mother's old files. Rachel had surprised everyone by asking to help with the company transition. At first I'd been skeptical, but she'd proven herself invaluable in uncovering decades of hidden dealings. Turned out years of social climbing had given her skills in research and networking that translated well to forensic accounting. I excused myself from the meeting and drove to the warehouse where we stored archived company records. Rachel stood surrounded by boxes, her designer outfit dusty, her perfectly manicured nails chipped from digging through files. Look at this, she said without preamble, holding up a folder. Mother kept records of every problem the family solved over the years. Not just your mother's case, dozens of others. Whistleblowers silenced, competitors destroyed, politicians bought. I took the folder, scanning the contents. Names, dates, amounts. A comprehensive record of corruption. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Your mother could face additional charges. Rachel's laugh was bitter. My mother's already in prison, but these other people, the ones who helped her, who enabled the system, they're still out there, still in power. I thought you'd want to know. I studied my cousin. 6 months ago, she'd been shallow, self-absorbed, cruel. The trial had changed her. Watching her mother's crimes exposed, seeing the pain our family had caused, had forced her to question everything. What do you think I should do with this? I asked. What you've been doing. Tell the truth. Clean house. Make things right. She met my eyes. I spent my whole life believing the Wellington name meant we were better than everyone else. Now I know it just meant we were better at hiding our crimes. You're changing that. Let me help. I made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. There's a foundation board seat open. It's yours if you want it. Rachel's eyes widened. You trust me with that? I trust that you want to be better than your mother taught you to be. That's a good start. Back at the office, I found Mrs. Greenwood waiting. My former teacher had become the foundation's education director, bringing decades of experience to our literacy programs. Elena, we have a situation, she said. The mayor wants to meet about the Santos Community Center proposal. The community center, my biggest project yet. A state-of-the-art facility in my mother's old neighborhood, offering education, job training, and support services for immigrant families. The mayor had been dragging his feet on permits. He's concerned about the politics, Mrs. Greenwood continued. Rich girl with newfound money trying to buy goodwill in a poor neighborhood. Except I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a hardware store. He doesn't know that story. Most people don't. Maybe it's time they did. She was right. I'd been so focused on business and legal battles that I hadn't shared my personal journey. That afternoon, I sat down with a local journalist who'd been following the Wellington story. Tell me about growing up with Linda Wellington Reyes, she said. So I did. About our tiny apartment with its herb garden on the fire escape. About Mom teaching me to find beauty in simple things. About secondhand clothes and library books and treasures discovered at yard sales. About a woman who chose love over money, principles over privilege. She could have claimed her inheritance any time, I explained. Instead, she lived modestly and built a quiet empire of good works. She taught me that wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with it. The article ran the next day. The charity case's daughter. How Elena Reyes went from hardware store to boardroom. It told both stories, the love story of Charles and Maria Elena, and the quieter love story of Linda raising me while seeking justice. The response was overwhelming. Emails poured in from people who'd known my parents, who'd been helped by Linda's anonymous donations, who'd witnessed the Wellingtons' cruelty firsthand. And surprisingly, from other charity cases, people who'd been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated, the mayor called that afternoon. About those permits for the Santos Center. Yes? They'll be approved by end of week. And Ms. Reyes? My mother was an immigrant too. I understand better now what you're trying to do. As I hung up, James appeared in my doorway. Board meeting in 5, but first, you should see this. He handed me his tablet, showing our company's latest sustainability report. Carbon emissions down 40%, worker satisfaction up 60%, and we're on track to exceed profit projections for the 3rd straight quarter. He grinned. Turns out your father was right. Doing good is good business. The board meeting focused on our new direction. We were divesting from harmful industries, investing in renewable energy, implementing fair wage policies. Some old guard members still grumbled, but the results spoke for themselves. After the meeting, I visited the cemetery. It had become my Thursday ritual, bringing fresh flowers, sharing the week's victories and challenges with the 3 people who'd shaped my life. As I arranged roses on Linda's grave, I heard footsteps. An elderly man approached, well-dressed, but walking with a cane. Ms. Reyes? I'm Henry Caldwell. I was your father's best friend. I'd heard the name in board meetings. Caldwell Industries was one of our oldest partners. You knew Charles? Knew him? I was supposed to be his best man. His eyes grew distant. I was on the boat when he died. The accident. It always felt wrong to me. Too convenient, happening right before he was going to challenge the family. My heart quickened. What are you saying? I'm saying I've carried suspicions for 27 years. After your mother was killed, I was afraid to speak up. But now, seeing what you're doing... He pulled out a worn envelope. Charles gave me this the day before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure his child received it when they were old enough to understand. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting. To my child, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and there are things you need to know. The Wellington family is built on secrets darker than you can imagine. I've discovered evidence of crimes, going back generations, not just business corruption, but worse. Murder, extortion, destruction of lives. I was planning to expose it all, to use my position to bring the truth to light and rebuild our family's legacy on honest foundations. But powerful people want these secrets buried. If something has happened, to me, it wasn't an accident. Look into the Blackwater development deal of 1996. Follow the money. Trust no one who was on the board then. Your mother, Maria Elena, knows none of this. I've kept her safe by keeping her separate from family business. But if you're reading this, you're probably older, hopefully stronger, possibly in a position to finish what I started. The truth always surfaces. Sometimes it just needs help. All my love, Charles Wellington, your father. I looked up at Henry. The Blackwater development deal? A real estate project that made the family millions. 3 people died in accidents during the construction. Charles suspected they were murdered to cover up safety violations. He sighed heavily. After Charles died, I was too scared to investigate. I had a family to protect. But you kept the letter. I knew someday his child would come looking for truth. I just didn't expect it to take so long, or for you to be so much like him. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with Thomas Martinez. The federal prosecutor had become a trusted ally in our fight for justice. Blackwater Development, I said, showing him the letter. 1996. Can we still investigate? Thomas studied the letter, then started typing. No statute of limitations on murder, if we can prove those deaths weren't accidents. He looked up. This could be bigger than your mother's case. This suggests systematic criminal enterprise, spanning decades. Then let's expose it all. Over the next few weeks, we quietly investigated. Rachel proved invaluable, using her social connections to gather gossip and old rumors. James worked the business angle, tracking shell companies and money trails. Mrs. Greenwood, surprisingly, had contacts in journalism from her years of advocating for education reform. The picture that emerged was staggering. The Wellington Empire wasn't just built on sharp business practices, it was built on blood. Competitors who died in accidents, politicians who suddenly reversed positions after private meetings, activists who disappeared or went silent. Your father was right, Thomas said during one late-night session. He was killed because he was going to expose this. Your mother was killed because she had proof of his suspicions. And Linda spent 27 years gathering evidence while keeping me safe, I added. She was playing the long game, waiting until you were in a position to use the Wellington power against itself. As our investigation deepened, I continued. The public work of transforming the company. The Santos Community Center broke ground. The scholarship program launched. Worker wages increased across all subsidiaries. But privately, we were building a case that would shake the foundations of Riverside's elite. 1 month after finding Charles's letter, we were ready. Thomas had enough evidence for RICO charges, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the same laws used against mob families. Are you prepared for this? He asked. This will destroy what's left of the Wellington name, your name. I thought about Maria Elena's courage, Charles's integrity, Linda's patience. The Wellington name destroyed itself years ago. I'm just turning on the lights. The indictments came down on a Friday. 17 current and former Wellington board members, 6 politicians, 12 business associates. The charges ranged from fraud to conspiracy to murder. The media exploded. Wellington crime family exposed. Decades of corruption unveiled. Charity case heiress brings down empire of crime. Through it all, I kept working. The company stock initially plummeted, then began to rise as investors realized we were cutting out the rot, not destroying the foundation. The legitimate businesses, the ones Charles had tried to protect, were solid. At the next board meeting, only 5 members remained. James, Rachel, Mrs. Greenwood, myself, and Henry Caldwell, who joined after providing Charles's letter. The company's reputation is in shambles, one institutional investor said via video conference. How do you plan to recover? I stood, thinking of all the people who'd fought to bring us to this moment. We don't recover the old reputation. We build a new one, based on truth, justice, and the vision my parents died for. I walked to the window, looking out over the city. Charles Wellington and Maria Elena Santos believed business could be a force for good. Linda Wellington Reyes proved that patience and persistence could overcome any injustice. I'm not trying to save the Wellington name. I'm using it to build something entirely new. 6 months later, at the Santos Community Center's opening ceremony, I stood before a crowd that included immigrant families, business leaders, journalists, and former Wellington employees who'd suffered under the old regime. This center is named for Maria Elena Santos, I announced, a young woman who dared to love across boundaries, who fought for her child's future, who died because she wouldn't accept the world as it was. I unveiled her portrait, painted from the few photographs I had, showing her smiling, confident, unafraid. But this center is also Linda Wellington Reyes's legacy. She could have lived in luxury but chose to serve others. She could have forgotten injustice but chose to fight it. She raised me to believe that privilege comes with responsibility, that truth matters more than comfort, that love is stronger than fear. The crowd applauded, but I wasn't finished. And this center honors Charles Wellington, who saw through his family's facade and tried to change it from within. He died young, but his vision lived on through the two extraordinary women who loved him and the daughter who never knew him but carries his dreams forward. That night, alone in my office, I read through the letters I'd collected. Charles writing to Maria Elena about their future. Linda's journal entries about raising me while seeking justice. My own notes from board meetings where we'd voted to divest from harmful industries, invest in communities, right old wrongs. The phone rang. It was James. "Turn on the news," he said. The headline scrolled across the screen. "Wellington heir nominated for National Business Ethics Award." "You did it," James said. "You took the worst family scandal in Riverside history and turned it into a model for corporate reform." "We did it," I corrected. "All of us. Everyone who fought, who remembered, who refused to let the truth stay buried." After we hung up, I walked to the window. The city sparkled below, full of stories yet to be told, injustices yet to be corrected, dreams yet to be realized. On my desk sat 3 photographs, Charles and Maria Elena at some company party, young and in love, unaware of what was coming. Linda holding baby me, her eyes fierce with protective love. And a new one, me at the Santos Center opening, surrounded by scholarship recipients, my extended family of truth seekers and justice fighters. The girl who'd been called a charity case at her mother's funeral now controlled one of the state's largest companies. The daughter who'd never known her real parents now carried forward their legacy. The woman who'd grown up in careful hiding now stood in the brightest spotlight, unafraid. The Wellington name, which once meant power built on oppression, now stood for transformation, justice, and the radical notion that business could be a force for good. Charles had dreamed it. Maria Elena had died for it. Linda had protected it. And I had made it real. Looking out at the city lights, I made a silent promise to all 3 of them. This was just the beginning. Every life touched by our programs, every wrong righted, every truth told, would be part of their story, our story. The charity case hadn't just inherited an empire. She'd inherited a revolution. And she was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.